Hi there, everybody. My name is Spencer Bauman, and welcome to my very first talk ever. Uh, Every pen mark leaves a trace is the title of it. An in progress retrospective of A Prisoner in Your Skull, an tempting entertainment horror anthology. Um, yeah, so you may be wondering who I am necessarily. Uh, who's the person that's going to be talking at you for the next half an hour and change? Hi, I'm Spencer. That's who. Um, I publish games under the title of Attempting Entertainment. You could say that I am an independent game developer, but really, Attempting Entertainment is just the name I use in a professional setting because it's a little bit easier to hide behind a name that isn't yours given at birth. Um, the kinds of games that I publish under the Attempting Entertainment brand umbrella are really small, experimental, narrative-driven games that I like to imagine really displays and is an example of the human condition. I try to be very empathetic in the games that I create and tell stories that I want to see more people put into games, and that's those are stories that are very inclusive, stories that are uh, very honest about the human condition in all of its cathartic glory. Um, but I'm also a game design senior at LTU, and for a number of years there, I was also a labor organizer. But my tales of labor organizing is a different talk for a different day. That's more prepared than it is right now. So, what is this talk going to cover necessarily? Uh, Before I get into the post-mortem of A Prisoner in Your Skull, which is a anthology that myself, Aaron Duke, and Jacob Wolford, two other extremely talented students at LTU, we've all been making for the thesis course. I'm going to dig into a bit of the research into screenwriting and storytelling that really inspired the creation of those two. So, um, without any further ado, to quote the great Lindsay Ellis, let's take a look at how we got here. So, before I dig into the talk any further, though, I do want to put out a bit of a blanket disclaimer. A lot of what I'll be covering is going to be very critical of the state of storytelling in games, but that criticism would be disingenuous if I didn't first acknowledge that over the last few years, really, storytelling in games have been making great strides forward just in terms of nuance and quality in their approach and pacing and everything. A few examples are on the screen currently. Gone Home, Outer Wilds, Her Story, Season 1 of The Walking Dead. I encourage anybody to play these games if they want to see really great high watermarks for the kinds of storytelling that currently exist in games, and my goal um, is to really help elevate storytelling to these levels of quality at a more consistent basis than currently exists throughout the medium. So, without any further ado, let's get into it. And I'm going to first start off by describing a term that I think has become a bit of a punching bag for good reason, and for good reason in some circles, not good reason in others. But ludonarrative dissonance. For anybody not familiar, ludonarrative dissonance is the term that arises when the game that you're playing, the mechanics of the game that you're playing, and the story of the game that you're playing do not line up. And it causes a feeling of discomfort in you, the player. Great, often used example of this is the Uncharted series, how the story of the Uncharted series portrays Nathan Drake as this fun-loving, swashbuckling, roguish type, while mechanically speaking, thinking you are really using Nathan Drake to commit mass murder of many people. Um, and I encourage you to watch the Folding Ideas video on ludonarrative dissonance, and the next video that I'm going to reference that digs into a bit more of how that term came to be through what was really the ludology and narratology debate. Debate in heavy scare quotes here. Anybody who knows me knows that I love games criticism, and one of my favorite critics is Errant Signal, or Chris Franklin. And he did a great video called "The Debate That Never Took Place" on YouTube back in 2015 that really digs into the history behind that term. And so for time's sake, I'm not going to go into it in as much detail as he did, but to roughly summarize the real fundamental misunderstanding surrounding the term ludonarrative dissonance is early on, before game studies were more of a formal thing as they are today, there were really two different fields of thought that arose and were arose in a very synchronous manner. One, ludology; the other, narratology. Narratology really focused on the study of games, the study of stories in games and how stories arise out of the games that we play. And ludology was really the focus of the study of the mechanics of the games themselves. Now, the misunderstanding that takes place is that a lot of people think that one rose up out of the ground in opposition towards another, when fundamentally these two things were interlinked. They were never supposed to be opposing ideologies. They were just supposed to be they were supposed to work more hand in hand with each other. However, there was a misunderstanding that took place, which caused a rift in games media, games critics, consumers, and developers themselves, that games either have to focus and be mechanics first, or focus on story at the detriment of the mechanics of the game. And this is really no better summed up than in the now infamous, I imagine, John Carmack quote, "Story in a game is like story in a porn movie. It's expected to be there, but it's not that important." Even though fundamentally that misunderstanding surrounding ludology and narratology was a misunderstanding, and academia, the circles of academia, have since moved on, this idea that stories and games are two separate entire fields, it's really invaded the common lexicon of a lot of people that I've tried to have conversations with about stories and games. How I see a lot of conversations play out on the internet. Obviously, the internet, not the most reliable place in the world in message boards, but really, despite the progress that has been made since, like I mentioned in the disclaimer, it just this misunderstanding is really invaded everyone's train of thought necessarily. So as a developer student, it was really demoralizing there for a long time as someone who wanted to specialize in writing and narrative design. I really didn't know or understand how to build a body of work when the body of work that I wanted to create was so diametrically opposed to one another, even though logically speaking they weren't. This really led to a long period of time of analysis paralysis to me. I spent a long time not making anything out of a fear that, like, oh, whatever it is that I would make would be looked upon in a negative light by either party. The story wasn't good enough to stand on its own, but the game wasn't good enough. It has a good story, but the game isn't really a game. It's just one of those walking simulators. But it's also that I took that in combination with I took that in combination with an observation that I make as I moved through undergrad, that while not all the time, uh, it's a moderately common occurrence that student-based projects don't really see the light of day outside of an academic context. And as someone who really tries to put a lot of my pride and a lot of my effort into my writing, to spend so much time on a single project with the understanding that it will never see the light of day is a bit demoralizing for a lot of understandable topics, which this anxiety that I felt over this debate really was at the forefront of my mind throughout the majority of my time in school, and it really led up and was what created the Made for TV anthology. Now, Made for TV is a separate. To sum it up, it's made for the underlying thread between all of these games is that they are entirely narratively complete experiences that you can play in a matter of 20 minutes. To borrow a term from Nina Freeman, these are little vignette games, little day in the life of tales. And really, my primary goal with making this anthology was to just get work out there and not really care about how it came out to other people. This was an excuse for me to tell stories that were complete, that were finished, and get them out into the public discourse, for better and worse. And it was also this anthology was also an excuse for me to really experiment with different development tools. The games that I have on the screen before you right now have all been made in either, pardon me, they have all either been made in the Bitsy or Twine tool sets, and it's been a real great chance to really familiarize myself with things that aren't just Unity. And some of my proudest work has really existed within this made-for-TV framework, really using it as an excuse to just put it out there. And it's the moderate success, and I say success that for Made for TV, success for a game development student. It caught the attention of Aaron Duke, who, without Aaron Duke, he is the programmer behind Prisoner in Your Skull, and without him, the two games that currently exist, Let a Long Way Down and Ceremony, they would not be in their current state, and I give Aaron all of the credit there for really putting his nose to the grindstone and making these concepts a reality. And so when he approached me about doing a similar anthology-based approach for our term and thesis, I was really excited at the prospect, as it's something that I've done before. And it's something that really allowed me to dig further into my working understanding that there's still a lot that needs to be done to improve the state of games writing today. So as I really dug further into my research, an often quoted source of information and guidance a lot of games writers have pulled on is Dan Harmon and his 8-point storytelling circle structure, as referenced by this heavily artifacted JPEG. This is his storytelling circle put into practice. And that storytelling circle was really the master key that I needed that made writing understandable. It really explained in a bare bones way that like every single story that you will ever encounter has a structure, and these are the tools. This is what makes it tick. And so I really look at a lot of the research that I've done in thesis so far is an attempt to really formalize Dan Harmon's 8 point storytelling structure in an academic context. And as I dug further into that research, I found a lot of other people come to the same conclusions that Dan Harmon did, but in that academic sense already, just approached from different trains of thought, different mediums, so to speak. And the next two mediums are both from screenwriting. Claudia Johnson and Lance Lee, their two books, Crafting Short Screenplays That Connect and Death and Life of Drama, Reflections on Writing and Human Nature, they both touch on similar conclusions that Dan Harmon drew upon in his 8 point storytelling structure, and that is these 2 points that I've laid out for you on the screen. To dig into the first point, when I say conflict theory is not comprehensive, in the world of screenwriting, conflict theory is the idea that in order for any story to exist at all, there needs to be some sort of conflict that drives it at that base level. All stories are just problems that reach various levels of resolution. Now, when I say that conflict theory is not comprehensive, it's not the whole picture. It's conflict theory does not make a story exist on its own, does not make a good story exist on its own. In order for a good story to exist, conflict theory needs to work hand in hand with this cycle of societal disconnection. Now, societal disconnection in this context is just the idea that over the course of a story, your characters will interact with society at a pace that is right for their own personal development. Now, that means that sometimes your characters will interact with large groups of people, and that will be great because it shows that they are connected to a larger society. They understand their place in the world. And in other instances, it'll show that your characters, when your characters do not interact with a larger society, that can do a really good job at portraying isolation, and that can do a really solid job at really getting across to the audience that they may also have been isolated in certain instances. It really approaches them at a baseline level that is important, and when working hand in hand with this idea that problems always exist, it really helps ratchet up the quality of your storytelling a bit. Now, these 2 points need to work hand in hand with the next point that I have found in a bit larger book called Ethics and Culture, the dissemination of values through literature and other media. Now, the last 2 points of conflict theory and societal disconnection, it's all very a bit formal. These are like concepts that can be applied to any story that is created. But really, good stories reflect morals. Good stories reflect ethics. And in large part, the dissemination of values through literature and other media really comes to this conclusion that entertainment's primary function is to enrich discussion around moral authenticity. And in order for a good story to exist, not only do the 2 prior points need to be present in your story, but your story also needs to reflect some amount of morals that you as a writer possess. That concept of moral authenticity is really is really just your ability as a writer to reflect the morals and ethics that you believe in, whether intentional or not. Of course, nobody wants to be preachy as a writer, but also a story without any morals or answers to the problems they face at all can come off as rather clinical, and that's no way to write a good story at the very least. So these 3 points are rather, again, kind of formal points, but in the in my journey to seek out ways to really transfer this research and transfer these ideas and conclusions that I've come to into practice into these games, I also draw upon the methodology of another developer that I look really highly up to, Nina Freeman. Nina Freeman is the developer of StarMade games, and she's worked on bigger indie titles such as Tacoma. She's someone that I just put in a real high regard, even if the subject matter of the games that she has produced is quite drastically different than my own. Her her the time that she spent in her master's course of looking at different ways to incorporate the fundamentals of poetry into the format of video games is really something that I see myself doing in a similar context. If I'm not necessarily following directly in Nina Freeman's footsteps, I'm not making games that are more sexual in nature. I at least see her work as operating an adjacent field to my own. So that in combination with really all of this research in combination with really rejecting this long-term thinking of project-wise really allowed me to create some of my favorite work. It allowed me to create work that I'm really proud of. So that's how we got here, more or less. Now let's take a look at what we got. Now, first off, another disclaimer. What I'm gonna get into with the postmortem of A Prisoner in Your Skull is purely reflective of my own experience. I do not seek to speak for Aaron or Jacob, as I'm sure that they can draw their own conclusions and the ways that they affected them, the ways development affected them as a programmer and as a heavily focused 3D artist is different to my own as someone who wants to focus on writing. So with that out of the way, all right, so Let a Long Way Down. For those unfamiliar with Let a Long Way Down, over the course of the game, you play as the courier Levi Hopkins, who's a bit of a recluse, and recluse who has a habit of murdering people. That's right, you play as a serial killer, murderer person. And you discover his anger he has towards social media companies. It's a bit of an experience that was modeled after 30 Flights of Loving and Paratopic, and we have a trailer.
Do you really think anything you own is yours anymore? These things in our pockets pick up and listen in on every conversation we will ever have. And all the other companies out there in that Silicon Sodom and Gomorrah are just trying to wipe out all the good that's come from it. And the GOP making consistent, incremental policy. And if you don't think that the liberal media and those demonic socialists are all out there using that information to villainize good, God-fearing families that stand for traditional Western values, then you are a literal child. Do you really think anything you own
All right. So, what went well with development? Personally speaking, I think that we were able to create a very airtight experience in modeling the game after other games like 30 Flights of Loving and Paratopic. We were very judicious with the style of relying heavily on jump cuts. And I think at the end of the day, that worked out in our favor, even if initially it created a bit of an abstract experience for others to play through. Another thing that went well for us is marketing. Uh, this was the first game where we really tried to make marketing a bit of a priority after the fact of after the fact that the game was already out. We ended up creating a list of other small Let's Players. We shared out, sent them keys on our itch page, and we saw a good amount of response from that. We made about $50, which is a wild success for student developed project. Initially, it's certainly way more than we were expecting, and we charged around $1 a piece with the option for more. The giving people a baseline of like, hey, it's just $1 to get your foot in the door, but if you want to send us more, that'd be greatly appreciated. That model works really well for us. And another thing that I believe really worked well in our favor was that we had a strong mechanical weight and diversity of mechanics in addition to the story that we told. Now, naturally, telling a story where we put the player in the seat of a serial killer, really someone who was uh, modeled after the Unabomber, put into a Silence of the Lambs type scenario. Um, it's very light, very light content matter. But over the course of the game, I believe we balanced really well of having heavier mechanical moments of assembling the bombs that you sent out. Um, Really discovering what's going on with the person that you tied up into your safe in your basement. We really balanced that well with like more traditional exposition. Even if it took folks a little bit to pick up on what was going on, I think at the end of the day, most people got it as shown in the response to the game. Now, what went wrong? Of course, when we set out to make 3 games over the course of a term instead of just focusing all of our time on one game, time management becomes a bit of a topic of discussion. We could have definitely fleshed out more from a narrative standpoint to really help fill in some of those abstract gaps. I could have provided more detailed exposition, of course, balancing it with that give and take of like how much is too much. I could have definitely spent more time trying to give the scene a little bit more detail from that end. Yeah, as mentioned before and throughout this as well, the abstract nature of the game was a bit of a double-edged sword. And I think we could have added definitely way more polish to the game than where it stood right now. I think Let a Long Way Down has a bit of an amateurish feel to it, which is to be expected for a student-based project. It's certainly no surprise, but I think if we allowed to give ourselves more time, we could have really ratcheted up the experience to something that was really like eye catching. But considering the time constraints that we put ourselves under willingly, I think we're still rather happy with what we were able to produce. So that's the first game out of the way. Next game is Ceremony. Now, in the course of Ceremony, you play as a bartender. It's very heavily indebted to the work of David Lynch and Blue Velvet, but you play as the bartender Andrew Conway, the owner of the Ozette Coast, who's at something of a low point in his life, and he opens up his bar to a local community theater gang to put on a stage play for the night, and it's been met with surreal results. So we also have a trailer for this one.
I'll take a gin and tonic.
Change of pace from the evening mojitos, I see.
Yeah, it just feels like the right move to commemorate the passing of so many people.
Hey, won't hear any complaints from me. You're a pain in the ass to make.
Oh, so now I'm a pain in the ass to serve?
No more than anyone else is. Just in a different way.
That's a comforting thought.
Don't take it personally. Plenty of pretentious folks come through. You won't be the last.
Speaking of pretentious, I never thought I'd see the day you let a theater company come through. I knew you couldn't have developed an ear for culture overnight. So, what's their name?
What's the fucking end goal here, Andrew?
Look, I really don't get what the big deal is.
No. You don't get to downplay this. We can't talk about things like the possibility of having an open relationship until we both agree on the specifics. That does not give you the free rein to fuck whoever you feel like.
You seriously expect, though, a hot-blooded male like myself not to just pass up on an opportunity like Alice?
Pass up an opportunity? Like Alice? Who even are you?
Come on, Janie, you know me.
No, I thought I did, but apparently I don't. You're just some hypocrite that never considers the feelings of other people and manipulates them to get into bed. Leave.
But Jane...
Leave!
So, what went well? With Ceremony, I don't think it'd be going too far out of the way to say that it was definitely a more indulgent experience from my end. And I think we really swung for the fences, both from a narrative perspective and an story perspective, narrative perspective and game perspective. And I think we really put in an attempt there, at least. Yarn Spinner was also a great tool. A lot of the dialogue system that we implemented throughout Ceremony was used with Yarn Spinner. And even though dialogue systems are definitely intensive to implement, to put it kindly, a lot of what Yarn Spinner had out of the box, so to speak, was really approachable to us. Also, I think we did a great job at really making sure that there is a mood that is established throughout the game. Definitely a little, even though it's a bit more abstract of a story, perhaps, I think we did a good job at trying to really set a mood and be clear about what we were going for. So now, what went wrong? If you can tell by my voice, project management is important. As opposed to Let a Long Way Down, we did not set up a Trello board for Ceremony. Now, of course, Let a Long Way Down, using the Trello board for Let a Long Way Down was a great way to make sure that we stayed on track with everything that we were supposed to stay on track with. And I think we all went into the development of Ceremony assuming that we would make a Trello board eventually, yet we never did. So obviously we got it out the door. At the end of the day, it's great, but I think a lot of the issues that we ran into during development really relied upon the lack of a Trello board. And because of that project management kerfuffle that we had there for a bit, Development of the game definitely took over priority of the marketing. We did not have as strong of a push for ceremony as we would have liked, just because really making sure that we got it out the door was what took focus. And I still absolutely encourage anybody to give ceremony a shot for themselves, and I really hope you enjoy it because we put a lot of ourselves into it. But we also there are aspects of the script that could definitely have spent more time in the oven, metaphorically. Um, there's definitely a lot more dialogue in ceremony than there was in Let a Long Way Down, and I think that's both to its benefit and its detriment. We definitely tried to tell a bit more of a nuanced story in ceremony. However, I think that there were still spots that could have been refined had I gone back to it more, and had we not been as just intently focused on getting it out the door. However, though, that is it. Thank you so much for sticking with me here. Yeah, that's it.